Brian, it is absolutely fantastic to talk to you today. I know you have just come off dealing with yet another lockdown in Victoria, so there's been a fair bit going on in your world, but a treat to grab you today, and thank you so much for coming on the Green Room podcast.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Well, despite the unexpected lockdown that you have just gone through, I know there is a hell of a lot more going on in Pseudo Echo world and for yourself right now. Most recently, the amazing news that you have just released an incredible brand new album, 1990, The Lost Album Demos. But let's come back to that in just a moment. You will also be hitting the road, bringing a live show to everyone, which is such a foreign concept for a lot of us after what we've just been through. But let's dive straight into the album. How does it feel to actually have finally released this incredible time capsule after such a long period of time? It's been a few decades in the making.
Just a few, it's quite an experience because I'd I'd given up on it. I mean, back in '89, I was requested to send in some tapes they were initially written for the fourth Pseudo Echo album, but then because there was a surprise element in our last meeting where the band just dispersed and that was the end of that, I was then sort of notified and requested this, my songs that I had written for the fourth album. So they were considering it for a solo album, I guess, and that seemed to be the consensus. So there was a sort of some urgency to it, I guess, while the striking while the iron's hot, so to speak. And so to waste no time, I just grabbed my one and only master tape. I don't know why I only had one, but, I thought I had one, and rushed it into the office and said, look, can you guys duplicate this? But it's my only copy. Do not lose it. And I was reassured it wouldn't be lost. But, however, after a few days when I tried again to get the tape, I was sort of fobbed off a bit, and then, weeks, months, and literally years, and I was still calling every now and then, but then I just gave up on it. It was just gone. I don't know where it went, how it got lost or anything, but it was lost. So this is like several years of my work that I'd written, in anticipating this fourth album. So I just moved on. I got into production and different field in the music biz, and fast forward 30 odd years. Occasionally I would remember some of those songs, little bits. I'd just sort of be on the piano and I'd start playing it. And Raquel, with her manager ear, would always be going, what's that tune? That's a great song. And I'd say, this is one of the ones that I've been telling you about that was lost, so I can't remember the rest of it. I don't have the lyrics written down. So this went on for a while. And then one day, it was another song I was playing, same response, pops into the room, quick, what's that song, And then we got talking about the tape. And Raquel said, you sure you didn't back it up or anything? I said, look, I didn't back it up because I would have it now and the songs would be with me. And I said, but it's not like me not to back it up. But I don't think I did. And I don't have it and I can't find it. And then she said, what about that big box of tapes we found while we were moving? It was like, oh, yeah, okay. But there were a lot of cassettes in there, lots of cassettes. And ironically, lots of them were master tapes. They were labelled, the word scribbled on in terrible handwriting, master, and not much else. So when you find, 20 tapes written master tape, you still got a bit of a challenge ahead of you. So, we got an old tape deck, hooked it up, and then for the next few weeks, I reckon, we went through songs. And then just one day, one of the songs that I wrote, the first song, I think was called Just Your Day, came on, and I just went, oh my God, this is the song. And then, fast forward, here's another one. And then fast forward again, here's another one. So we listened right through it. And then we were talking about it, what to do with it. Raquel said, you have to release this. It's gold. It's a time capsule of your band's history. And I said, no, I'd have to re-record it all and it will take me forever. And then, Raquel said, really, no, it's got to be like as is, authentic. Meanwhile, the tape is rewinding at this stage, the cassette, and that's all good. All of a sudden I look at it and I see one of the spools stops. And the other one's still going, and that's not a good sign to look at a cassette deck if that's how they should go together. So I quickly hit the stop and ejected it, and then the tape was basically ingested into the machine. It was an old machine. I didn't even service it before I played it. I just grabbed it. And we managed to sort of painstakingly get the tape out, use the old pen method and scroll it, get it back into the cassette without any creases or breaks or anything. So it's a miracle that we saved it. I can't believe we did after, it's a very fragile tape. So we pretty much straight away got it digitized and didn't take any more chances with the cassette deck. And that's it. That's it. We just remastered it to get the level up and get it all consistent. We didn't change anything. We couldn't mix it because it was already mixed. And they're rough, but they're sort of highly produced rough demos. So it is what it is.
I mean, for most of us, when we pack, we find, the jeans that we can no longer fit into, or the plates that we should have thrown out 10 years ago. Like, to stumble on something like that, and for the tenacity to get through all of that is just mind-blowing. And how on brand for Pseudo Echo, as such a seminal act in the 80s, to have an album out in 2021 that got chewed up by a cassette tape that you're literally screwing in on a cassette tape. Like, it couldn't be more on brand. Seriously, it's incredible.
Yeah, it was meant to be. This album was just searching to be released.
Yeah. And what do you think it is? I mean, as a band, as Pseudo Echo, as we all know, you were so massive in an era where Australians were being embraced by the rest of the world, but a lot of it was the Aussie pub, the pub rock bands and this kind of thing. And here comes Pseudo Echo with your gloss and your new wave glamour. What do you think it is that is still resonating about this sound and this time capsule in a very different era and very different decade too?
I think we found our thing. We found our own sound, even though we were greatly influenced by our peers at the time. I think for me, I never really set out to sound like any one particular of my idols and influences. It was always a very vague cross-section. So that was a good thing because I found my own thing in doing so. And I think because we had our own sound, our own look, we had our own material. It was something. It was a stamp. It was our thing, and so it stayed our thing. We didn't lose it. We hung on to it. And even in the recent albums that I've released over the last 10 years or so, I've always thought about the heritage of the band and its brand, its flavour, and tried to retain that. And I have this thing where I always go back to the past and get some element or elements and bring them into the current album. I'll always get an old song or some lyric or some part or some sound that'll make an appearance again, and it sort of just marries everything together.
Well, it's always, you always know when you're listening to a Pseudo Echo song, which is incredible. So that explains why we all kind of can pick it from a mile away. So that's fantastic to know. And I guess coming into this era of what we've just been through as well, did the whole pandemic thing actually impact? I mean, we have waited over 3 decades for this, so obviously an extra 12 months of insanity probably isn't, it's a bit of a drop in the ocean compared to the wait you've had. Yeah. But did that actually impact any plans, whether it's current plans or long-term plans of how you saw this album coming to life?
Well, ironically, it was this lockdown, the first lockdown, that basically enabled us to have the time to think about this stuff and for me to start playing it on piano and start thinking, well, is it there? And then when we found it, we also had the time then to put into it and go, we need, this needs to be released. We need to write some story about it so people know what happened and why it happened. And it all just fell into place. We started recalling stories of how it came to this point, how we got to the point of us going in different directions, how we got to the point of the band breaking up, and how we got to the point of coming back, and where it is today. So all these things happened during the pandemic. So, it's bad, but it wasn't all bad.
Yeah, well, I think that's the thing. If there's something good to come out of it, and you guys obviously turned it massively to an advantage, and everyone else benefited too. So, I mean, in a way, it's the good with the bad. It swings and roundabouts. But, yeah, what a journey. And, I mean, I know you've gone into it. I've seen on your social media you guys have released quite very personal accounts about how it all happened. I mean, you're on the brink of a 4th album. You're also then disbanding. You're in your late 20s. There's solo albums on the horizon potentially as well. But to come that full circle, I also saw you guys put up a very, very nostalgic interview. I think it was back in 1985 when you guys were first or, you know, being chatted to just after the whole countdown scenario. I mean,
Yeah.
that in itself bypassed and also fast tracked so much for it. But I'm quite interested to know, because I've read you say a few other things about that era. How did it
Yep.
feel, firstly, to have that amazing opportunity presented to you at such a very influential time that countdown was having on the world? But it showcased your potential, but was it that positive thing for you at the time? Like, were you able to see it as that, and did you actually appreciate it for that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, look, Countdown and all those music programs back in the day, they were absolute inspirations to us. You know, I would watch Countdown. You know, my family would sit around and say, oh, you could do that, Brian. You know, your band's as good as that. So there was always this encouragement, and it was like a goal. But I don't think I sort of just thought, have to be on Countdown, have to be on Countdown. I loved making music. I loved having a band, and that's what I did. And it was just a coincidence that there was someone we knew that went to school with us that knew Molly, that somehow got him a tape and got him to come to a show. Next thing, he's backstage at our gig. It's like, it's just surreal, you know. And then, you know, within a week, he's inviting us on the show unofficially against, you know, protocol of the station. And it was like, okay, well, cool. It just all sort of seemed to happen and fall into place. We never really questioned it, but it was an incredible time. We had a fantastic opportunity, and we took it by the horns. We just went, we're going with this. You know, we're not going to stop and say, no, we're too cool to do that, or this is, you know, we're not selling out. We went for it.
And I really like what you said in that interview. I mean, you were so young and you put it so perfectly. You said it presented you guys as a finished product. I mean, here you guys are. No record label happening, really kind of not flouting the rules, but obviously that right place, right time, everything's marrying up. And I feel like it was clearly meant to be. Like, things like that don't just happen.
Yeah. There were so many coincidences and strange crossings of paths with not only Molly, but with all the people in the industry. We just kept strange coincidences kept happening, you know, like it's Molly who played the original version of Funky Town to me in 1979, 1980, something like that.
Oh, my God.
I used to go to this club and Molly was the resident DJ there. He didn't know me. I didn't know him. And I used to just watch. I still like to watch the dance floor, see what excited people, listen to the grooves, listen to the textures. And I just took mental notes. That's what I did. You know, every week I would go to this club and just listen and observe. Somebody once introduced me to Molly and, you know, I didn't want to be a fanboy or anything, so I just said hi and that was it. And he kind of probably knew me as this shy kid on the sidelines, never dancing, never talking, just kind of listening and watching. And so when he came to see Pseudo Echo for the first time, he didn't know it was my band. He just came in, saw the band and went, that's that kid. That's the little kid that I see every week, you know.
Oh,
and
my God.
it was strange, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and going from that, I mean, you guys, as I said, like, it was obviously in an era where the Australian flavour was very much geared to the guitars and the sweaty, all that kind of rock and roll stuff. But you essentially came to become one of the best known Australian bands in an era where In Excess were absolutely throwing down all over the world as well. And what I find interesting about that era, and I'd love to know if this is correct, is that there was a lot of talk of a lot of rivalry between bands that were of a very similar vein. I mean, you had Kids in the Kitchen happening at the same era, but you went on to play with them later on in life. Like, how authentic was that rivalry? Was there actually any of that going on? Were you aware of it, or was that a complete beat up that everyone just wanted to make true?
There was probably a healthy rivalry. We were all good friends. We all looked out for each other and we all started out together. And, you know, each one would call up the other band and, hey, can you guys do a gig with us? Do you want to do this? And we didn't really care who was on first or second, or it probably by the time we all had record deals and songs in the charts, it got a little bit more competitive.
Yeah.
but nothing bad. You know, we often all toured together and we loved it. You know, we'd be, oh, how's your song going? It's going great. And how's yours going? Oh, that's going great too. And so it was good.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's an interesting sidestep, I guess, to the current era of music as someone who has been in the industry for so long now and coming from a lot of camaraderie by the sound of it, even though there's that healthy competition. What is your take, like taking the pandemic out of the equation? Because obviously that adds a lot of negative factors to it. But what's your take on the Aussie music industry as it stands at the moment? Are you optimistic for this long-term sustenance for a lot of bands who may be coming up at the age you yourself were starting off?
Yeah, it's a different beast now. It's very different. In some respects, it's kind of easier in the way that any band can have their stuff up on iTunes and Spotify, whereas in my day you couldn't. You were unknown. You were unheard of. Unless you were good, really good, you wouldn't even get a look in. You may not even get any more gigs if you're crap. So I think these days there's more available to a young artist, to a platform to present themselves, but possibly many artists rely too much on the ease of technology. And, you know, it does a lot for you. You know, you push a button and it does all this, and you can tune your voice and you can put it in time. So therefore there's there's more having a go at it, that's for sure. But it must be amazing. Like for me, if I were thinking when I was 20 that I could just upload my music and the whole world could potentially hear it, that would be incredible. It was a much harder task back then to do that.
Well, and a harder task as well was coming from literally writing and creating music. I mean, it's no secret Pseudo Echo is named after a synth effect, and it actually came from an effect. Like, you guys were dealing with having to source everything you were using, and it wasn't just at your fingertips.
Yeah, I would spend hours learning every synthesizer I could get my hands on and learning how to make the sounds and make any sound that I could imagine in my head. If I wanted it to sound like strings, or I wanted to sound like a laser beam, or, you know, an explosion, I made sure I could manipulate the synthesizer and get the sounds I wanted to get. And I rarely used anything that came with the synthesizer. I would always go, well, that's all great, but I'm doing this. In fact, I kind of frowned at it when I would hear a sound that I knew was in a factory preset that had been on a current record. I would sort of go, I know that sound. It's that one there, and that's the next one. And so for me, I didn't want anyone to do that. I wanted all my sounds to be unique. But so yeah, it was. There was more to it, that's for sure.
And have you embraced the whole world of the digital workstations since the really hard yards you've put in?
Absolutely. It's the greatest thing ever to be able to be creative and not be stifled by needing funds to go to a big studio and producers. And, you know, if you can create music and your work at home, it's incredible. You know, like, we couldn't do that. It was much harder to, like, the 1990s album. You know, I had a rhythm composer, a rhythm machine, and a very basic form of MIDI, musical interface, to play the keyboard if I needed to program. But mainly it was played live, and you just hit the record and you just played the song from one end to the other, and then I might go, okay, now I'll do the bass, and now I'll do the keyboards, now I'll do some guitar. Sure, I could multi-track it, but it was just as you did it. These days you can do a lot more. It's a lot easier. You can chop it up and loop it and fix it, and, you know, I'll use this bit here and then I'll use it again over here, and you can build it a lot more and assemble it, whereas back then you couldn't. You kind of performed it, and that's how it was.
Yeah, well, and the hard yards have carried over, and I guess the same goes for your live shows. But one of the amazing things, as we touched on really early on in this chat, was that you guys will also be hitting the road and actually getting back on stage performing for the masses. I have read rumours it's going to be a 2-hour extravaganza. Is there anything you can reveal about what we can expect from the shows?
Well, there are visuals. We're running synchronised visuals with the songs. And so we've had a team help us with that. So that's going to be a big step up. The show, being 2 hours, it's going to be a cross-section of our 40-year sort of history. And I think for the first time we're going to do something very intimate in the middle of the show, different to what we've ever done before, which will present songs in a different way. So, and then we can get back into the rock and roll.
Yeah, nice. And tell me, as a man who has done this for a fair few years now, I'm not going to put an exact number on it, but we all know it's been a long time now. How do you maintain your live gig energy? What is the secret recipe to your onstage energy? Because I need some energy. One coffee doesn't cut it for me, so I'm secretly just trying to steal some tips for myself. But what's the secret?
I think it's passion. That's what I think it is. I think there was a point in my career where I probably lost a bit of the spark, but once I got my personal life more in order and met my beautiful wife Raquel, who, you know, my God, she basically turned the band around and got it back happening for me, and got me to feel so much more passionate and believe in what I did, and that makes a massive difference when you walk out on stage and you're proud of the material and you feel confident about what you have. If you lose that spark, well, then it becomes very routine and the performances are going to suffer. So for me, it's the drive to want to keep doing it and loving to do it. I love performing. I love seeing a crowd smile and sing my songs back to me, and you know, this is the best reward.
Yeah, and it sounds like, Raquel, we've got a lot to thank her for too, because this album, the tour, like, God, what's she going to do next? It's brilliant.
Who knows? Well, she's got me doing a book, so.
There you go. We've got the trifecta. Yeah. I love it.
Yeah.
And with the whole live show thing too, I mean, when you guys came up quite quickly, like it was obviously a very swift change. You're in that era where everyone's hustling, you're playing every pub, every club, just chasing one show to the next. When you did finally get that expansion into the huge stage settings, did you actually have a preference? Did you still love that like intimate, sweaty nature of those smaller shows, or did you thrive on the big ones?
I think I liked the bigger stage. I loved it, getting bigger, and then it sort of got to a point where it's so big that it became a blur.
Yeah.
And then doing a few intimate shows, I loved it. I just thought, it's so great. You're just right there with them and you can feel the vibe. But I'd be lying to say there's nothing like the excitement of a massive crowd, you know, screaming your song back at you. It's electrifying.
Yeah. Well, I think the nice thing is you can kind of have that mix these days too, and especially with COVID, it's kind of meant that there's a bit more opportunity to do some slightly more intimate ones, and you know, seated gigs aren't always going to work for everyone, but it's been quite a nice experience.
The balance is fantastic. Yeah, the balance is great. And I think it's testing for yourself too, to, you know, when you play to 10,000 people, you're not really identifying with individuals. It's just a big blur and a raw. Whereas when you do an intimate show, you can sort of look into the crowd and see the face of individuals, and you can read a reaction, and that's a unique experience in itself.
Yeah. Well, I know there will probably be a certain song that will make the cut for this upcoming set. It would be remiss of me not to bring up Funky Town. And I know I really loved what you said about Molly actually being the one to introduce you to that. I absolutely adore that. But given it was such a huge hit for you guys, you know, obviously you had other hits in the mix as well. But if Pseudo Echo were going to do a cover song in 2021, what song would you do and why?
Wow, you know, I have a list as long as my arm of potential covers at any given time. Whenever I think of them, I write them down. I go, I'd love to do this song.
Nice.
There are many things that I consider when I do a cover because, firstly, you know, when you cover a song, you usually pick a song you love, and you usually love it because it's really good. And it's, you know, it's produced well, it's sung well, everything's good. That's why you love it. And therefore, it's a greater challenge to reinvent it and do your thing with it. So I often look at a song and say, well, what can I bring to it? If I'm to redo this song without sacrilegiously destroying it, how do I do it? What can I do? So that's a big part of it too. But there are many songs that I have on a list. There are so many you know, from current songs to really old songs. Sometimes it's a bit cheeky to do a current song, which is what we did back in the day with Funky Town. I mean, it was only 5 years after the fact. That's pretty close. These days, I guess they're a bit more bold. They do them, you know, before they even enter the charts. Somebody's covered your song these days.
True.
But yeah, there's nothing in particular, but most days I'll play something on my piano and go, gee, this is a nice song, and I will just go my own way with it. And do my thing, and then I'll go possible, and I might make the list and go, the
possible Pseudo Echo covers list. I like this a lot. I'm excited to see what may eventuate from this. And going back, I guess, to just before that whole era, before, you know, Pseudo Echo had even really become on anyone's radar. You guys started off in high school, obviously, back when people are still trying to decide what they want to be when they grow up. And
Yeah.
I'm still wondering that, but that's beside the point. Was there a moment for you guys when you realised that there was actually a huge shift happening and this could be something you could pursue professionally? Or was it just a massive blur, roller coaster? Suddenly you're here, suddenly you're on Countdown, suddenly you're in 2021.
Well, it was always the thing that I was going to do, but I never really thought about it in the way of, I don't know if I thought about it as my career or not. You know, my mother, you know, she got me a few auditions, when I say auditions, interviews for a job with the bank. And they must have thought I was taking the piss, you know, in the interview, because I was so out of it. I was on another planet. And, you know, the questions they were asking me was just so boring. They knew that was not for me. So that worked out good, because I didn't get that job. And then, you know, my mother, you know, hustled me off to the College of the Arts, the Victorian College of the Arts, and said, look, if you're going to be a musician, then, you know, you should do it properly, and you know, can't just be strumming away and yeah-ing. So I went to the audition at the College of the Arts, and that was an interesting experience. You know, I was about 14 years old, and Mum dressed me like mums dress you. You know, she put me in clothes that I just thought I looked hideous. You know, I just had these terrible shoes and these funny pants and this bad shirt and this tie, and I just, oh my God, you know, if I had my way, I would have been wearing sneakers and, you know, faded jeans and a singlet or something, you know, so I was all dressed up. And I felt ridiculous. And I had this guitar, and it's hanging on the wall here. And it's very rock and roll. It's locked on the wall, so I can't get it down. I would have. But it's, you know, it's got stars, and it's black with gold hardware, and it looks very rock and roll. It looks like something maybe, you know, Paul Stanley would play. And here I am going for an audition at the College of the Arts, which primarily was classical music. And so I'm walking in there with my brown alligator skin, you know, crocodile skin, whatever they call it, guitar case. Kids are looking at me, probably laughing, you know. And I go for this audition, and there were all these old people in, you know, black and grey suits with grey hair, sort of all around me in a circle. And they said, all right, you know, show us what you got. So I get my guitar, and I think they were a little bit concerned about the guitar when I took it out. There was a few looks of disapproval, and gave me an amplifier, and it was the most terrible sound too. You know, I had my own sound when I did with my band, which was like Jimi Hendrix. It was all distorted, and this was just the cleanest, terrible clinical sound. And they just wanted me to play, and I wasn't really accustomed to just playing the guitar. I would play with the band, so I'm just playing this guitar, you know, playing Stairway to Heaven or Black Knight or Smoke on the Water, and you know, they were saying to me, oh, yeah, okay, yeah, fast as you like, you know, play whatever you want, you know, and I'm playing away. There was this thing on the ground. It looked kind of like a deck chair, a little mini deck chair. I didn't know what it was. It's a thing to put your foot on when you play classical guitar like this, and you look all proper. But I was, you know, slumped over with my leg this way, and I just kicked it away. I didn't know what it was. And so yeah, after a few minutes of playing, they said, all right, that's enough. You know, I put the guitar away, and then there was a bit of a powwow, and then one of the sort of the older, distinguished-looking, you know, principals came over to my mother and I and said, right in earshot. I was right there. My mum then, he said, look, we don't think your son's cut out for music. You know, best look for another path. So it was like, you know, like, oh, you know, I'm dying, you know, like I'm just thinking. But then there was also, you know, I guess there was a little bit of, you know, well, I'll show you. So, yeah, so that was a bit hard, but
how did you pick yourself up from that?
I think I just was always determined. It was the thing I loved. It wasn't about whether I needed to do it for a career or I was going to please these people or these people. It was just for me. I just loved playing music, so there was no stopping me. I just, you know, I was always looking for other musos to jam with and put a band together and all this. So, and that's how the high school thing started. You know, I just I had a band. I started to, you know, first it was just me with my 12-string guitar, and that was good because, you know, I'd invariably play Stairway to Heaven or something like that, and there'd be a big gaggle of girls around me and, you know, going, oh, it's beautiful. And so that looked like a was not a bad job, that. And then I managed to find some other musos in the school, and they were okay. And I said, okay, well, you can play, you play the drums and you can play rhythm guitar. We needed a bass player. Our bass player wasn't much cop. He was better on rhythm guitar. So I said, look, you play the rhythm guitar, we'll find a bass player. And then one day I saw this guy, and I kind of vaguely knew him. He went under the name Piero at school, and he was walking along, and he had a guitar case, it looked like a long guitar case. So I figured it was a bass. And I only knew him vaguely. He was sort of more in the studious type of kids, and I was a bit more of a rebel. And so I said, hey, dude, what's in the case? And he said, cool, and he sort of opened it up. And there was this, brand new Fender bass. It was like, who has a Fender? Like we all just had crappy imitations of Gibsons and Fenders. None of us had a proper one because they cost about 5 times the price of our little copies. And so, he's got this beautiful Fender Precision bass. And said, it's my cousin's, but he sort of gives it to me and said I can use it whenever I like. I said, cool, do you want to be in my band? and that was Pierre Gigliotti, Pierre. So that's how he came to be in Pseudo Echo.
Oh, my goodness. I feel like,
he had the right bass.
Yeah, the right bass, the right place. Like you seem to continually have this moment of, And
he was good too. He was pretty good on bass.
That's a bonus. Lucky that. That's incredible. And look where it's led to. So to segue us into my final question to let you get on with your day, given you are on the Green Room podcast today and you are about to head out on a brand new tour to celebrate this incredible new album, what is the one essential item that still makes you a rider? What has to be backstage for you in 2021?
Wow. You got any ideas there, darling?
We'll decide now.
What has to be there? There are some things that'll come to me. I do like to have a small glass of port because that's a good emergency if you lose your voice. I don't know what it does. It does some magical thing to your vocal cords. So if I've been chatting too many interviews all day or been a bit vocal and just a slight hesitation in the high notes, I'll just have the little glass of port at the ready. So that's a good thing.
I might steal that for my when I talk too much on my podcast. This might be a good idea. I'll steal Brian Canham's secret to talking more. That's brilliant. Well, Brian, it's so awesome not just to have 1990, the Lost album demos out in the world, to also have you out on the road and to have you out of lockdown. Thank you so much for joining me on the Green Room. And
Thank you.
Cannot wait to see what happens next for you all. It's incredibly exciting.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Cheers.
Thanks, Brian.
Green Room with Tiana Speter is a podcast from the Handshake Agency Network, produced by Tiana Speter and Andrew Mast, with Pharrell D'Souza and Henry Gibson providing research. Recorded and engineered by Zig Parker, executive producer Craig Treweek.